Good afternoon, hello, and welcome to Bitovi Clavius Adventures, creating game with Angular and PixiJS Day 3. So, here at Bitovi, we are experts in front-end development that includes Angular, React, Node.js, DevOps, project management, UX, and more. If you find yourself in a need of web application development help, reach out to us for a free consultation by emailing contact@bitovi.com or visiting our website at bitovi.com. Also, check out our new Discord channel. You can see the link in the chat. My name is Igor and I'm a member of Angular team. Today, I'm joined by Mark Thompson, who is also a member of Angular team, and Philip Henning. Thank you both for joining. Philip, could you please introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about your gaming background and experience?
Sure, yeah. So I'm a DevOps consultant that works for Bitovi. I started about 2.5 years ago down this DevOps journey. But funnily enough, right as I started that DevOps journey, I was also kind of deep diving into game development, which has always been a bit of a passion of mine. Gaming is a big part of my life. And so it kind of seems like it's almost like a perfect merger of the technology and education that I've now acquired in my life, and then a hobby that I'm very passionate about. So, it's been a two-pronged attack in the last 2.5 years of learning a bit of game dev and learning a lot of DevOps.
Nice. That sounds really great. Do you have, what are some of your favorite gaming memories or experience from your childhood or recent years?
Mm-hmm. All right, so you can find this on LinkedIn. I've had a few people comment. I have this big blurb that speaks about my childhood and technology and all that. But really, the big entry point was my grandfather buying me an N64 in '95, and I got immediately into like the games like Super Smash Brothers, the original, things like Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and then eventually Majora's Mask, which I came back to appreciate as an adult. And then of course the series like Gex, which were absolutely underrated, amazing gems that were locked onto one console and never explored anywhere else.
Yeah, going with that, I guess that definitely you have your favorite game soundtrack, and how that contributes to the overall gaming experience.
Oh, absolutely. So, okay, so I'm going to tangent a bit here. So, when I first started into game development, I didn't realize how important music was. And so, when you start building a small studio team, first off, good luck. That's a bit of a challenge, but it's really fun because you're going to like meet a lot of really interesting people. And the two individuals that I think added a lot of value, but were criminally underrated, were our SFX guy and our music guy. Our music guy was a gentleman who lived out in Japan. He was over there visiting, and so he was kind of on a different schedule. But he was able to create really, really nice pieces for us using all modern technology, modern instruments and technology, lots of guitars and lots of stringed instruments and whatnot. And then combining that with somebody who was really proficient at SFX creation. I don't know if people really know how much goes into creating sound effects, but it's a lot. And so, I'm still working with a guy now. I work with him. I was just speaking to him like last week. Amazing gentleman, and his ability to provide really accurate and substance-rich, I think is the word that I would probably use, sounds that we then add to the game. That's what really adds depth to game, because gameplay, when you see things moving, like if there's no sound, if there's no tangible action to it, the impact of you, for example, jumping up and coming back down, there's no real impact to it unless there's a crunch of your feet landing and then you're moving. So
yeah, like the sound is giving like 3D experience, like completely new level. And if you would design your own video game, what kind of game would it be, and what features would it have? Mark told us the last time that the game that he would develop will be something most similar like Diablo, I think.
mm-hmm.
What is your opinion?
That's funny because I've been spending about 3 weeks thinking about what my next game might be. So I guess I started with Metroidvanias, and I'm a big fan of I'm bigger than big fan of Dark Souls. I'm a advocate and evangelist of all things Soulsborne. I'm a big into the Bloodborne and Sekiro. I've got multiple tattoos on my back for those. And so if I was probably going to make another game, it would definitely feature something of the action platformer variety, somewhere in that realm. Games like Prototype also come to mind. Those like criminally underrated, never again released gems that were just locked into those consoles and into our past.
Nice, nice. I would like to actually in the future to see, or you can share with us your game that you developed. I
Yeah.
saw one of them that was really cool to see.
Mhm.
And going with that, do you know like the question is like for both of you, do you know any game API that is open? So based on using the advantage of that game API, like for example the NBA or FIFA or some game that then we can use that API to build um, the, for example, the leaderboard or the high scoreboard or something like that. So is there any open API that we can use and then build something at the top of that?
Off the top of my head, I have no idea.
I built something with Destiny's API. I don't know if Destiny 2 carried the API over, but the original Destiny 1, there was an API, and I built a Slack bot that could be integrated into, obviously, I said Slack, Discord bot, my apology, a Discord bot that you could integrate into your Discord channel and communities and whatnot that would give stats for everybody and all that.
That's great. I was looking about the sport game API, but I couldn't find that is like completely open. It was kind of partial. Some part was open, but not like not not completely. So I mean, again, like the question is for both of you. I think that I already know the answer for the mark. But do you play the games in your free time? And if so, what games you've been playing recently, and what do you enjoy about them?
Not it.
Okay, so most recently I've been playing a lot of it's called Cycle Frontier. The reason why I play that is because it's a flavor wise, it's very much like Tarkov, and I am a huge Tarkov fan. I've been playing for thousands of hours on that now. Really big into. I would hesitate to call it a military sim, but I really like the first person shooter, and I really like the really deep mechanics of Tarkov. But yeah, it's not, and I say most recently. I mean, I'm playing thousands of hours. I guess the other most recent game was Age of Empires 4, which I thought was really
Oh,
good.
really? Awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good recreation of the old stuff. Though they've simplified a lot of the gameplay mechanics, what they have done is made every country and like every unit or whatever feel very unique, and that feels really cool. So when you want to play a clan or whatever, you feel like that clan has a very specific niche to it.
And what civilization you're using?
Ottomans, because I love Ottoman Rush. I like building a quick. So basically, the units that I pick, they build passive units, military units for free. And so what you do is you put it like the first thing, you put it down, and then you'll have units on the field before everybody else. You can go, be aggressive and poke people and try to get out their villagers before they can really scale the economy.
Nice.
And I fail every single time at it, so I have to put that up too.
And from the Age of Empires edition that includes Age of Mythology and what they have from the Age of Empires 1, what you find out is the most interesting edition. I guess it was like the Age of Empires.
Mythology.
Yeah.
Mythology? Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody who's ever played Age of Empires or whatever, they'll go to Mythology.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I'm personally a fan of Age of the Conqueror, something like that. It was, and then they build up the high definition like regame. It's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. I didn't play that game for a while, but it's one of, I mean, not one. It's actually my favorite one. Nice.
Recently, I know that this is again a bit tangential, but they're released. I don't know if it was entirely a joke. Something called OpenAI Copilot for Age of Empires, and so what it does is it's a third-party application that shows you how you can maximize what you're supposed to be doing. It's very funny.
Nice auto min max.
Exactly. Yeah, maximizing the min maxing. We've really come full circle.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm glad that I met someone who is also enjoy playing the Age of Empires.
Yeah.
And about experience and lessons. Like, can you share any valuable lesson or experience that you have gained from playing the video games as a developer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so one of the things is I think technology, you really get to see technology evolve with video games because there are very few applications that are hobby oriented with technology that are quite so active with the user. A lot of technology is passive, right? So if I want to read a blog, I'm going to go, I guess that's somewhat active, but it's still passively going to open it up and potentially listen to it or whatever. It's not super engaging. Whereas technology in video game realms are ridiculously engaging, and they also set the they're at the forefront of technology, looking at things like VR and AR. The first applications of those were video games and some other industries we won't mention. But the video game specifically, I think that it really shows like, hey, this is where technology is going. And it also is almost like the benchmark, the test of the technology itself. For the last 5 years, I've said, VR is not going to take off. It's AR. AR is going to be the thing that really takes off. And in that time, Pokemon Go came out and a whole bunch of other AR related and AR focused technologies came out. It's not that I don't believe VR is not possible. I think VR is going to be possible in my lifetime, maybe, sure. But the idea that you're adding things to the world is a lot easier than creating an entire world. And so it was, to me, obvious that AR was going to come out first. And now we're seeing industry trends in other fields starting to follow the same thing with for me, there's a Tim Hortons, which is like a coffee shop, and it's ingrained in Canadian culture. And Tim Horton was a hockey player, blah, blah, blah. Either way, they have an AR app that you can scan your coffee and it's like a prize center and all this stuff. And so, you can, like I said, that came out 2 years ago, but AR in gaming was 5-6 years ago. So they were setting those trends.
Nice. What do you think, Mark, about that? Did you have any experience or lesson valuable that you gained from playing the games?
Not really. I think the closest thing I could say to relating is I think, beginning of high school, I was one of the slowest people to run the track. But then I just thought of Sonic, and I remembered that, you got to go fast. So by the end of the year, I was able to keep up with the fastest kid in my PE class. So
nice motivation.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Yeah. But with the AR thing, I wanted to say, I think it would be this probably exists already, but like if you went to like a ramen shop and like when you finish your ramen, you can make it all the way to the bottom, then like you can like scan something at the bottom and like it's like a collectible type scenario.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
I
think Japan's going to do it. Of just seeing like Japan and what they've done with AR already. Not to cut you off, Igor, but man, like some of the commercials and advertisement in Japan with AR is unbelievably cool.
Yeah, I'm probably out of the game. I heard that actually the Apple announced that recently it will be this year available, but I didn't know that it's already at some point.
Oh yeah, lots of things out there that are already using AR technologies and in really cool ways, and it's only going to get better. Like things like stadiums, for example. Like I'm not a big sports fan, but you are, right? If you go to a stadium right now, they're already starting to do things that are AR related. Things like when a player has a puck on the ice, that there's like a thing that comes underneath them, which is obviously inspired by video games, right? 92 pro hockey, when your player had the puck, there was that little circle that came underneath them. That's now transported into the real world where they use AR to superimpose that circle underneath players so that viewers can watch it, right? That kind of stuff is already happening. And I think that's exactly that's a perfect implementation of like how technology has really influenced the real world.
That's crazy. I think you could probably get a lot of people on board with like getting the chip in your brain.
Yeah.
Like as a sell pitch is like sports would be so much better to watch. Like live. It just ingrain it in you. You get the stats. You get all the UX and UI.
Absolutely, Elon's like he's going to use that as his main sales pitch.
Yeah.
The next virtual world, right? That's what it's going to be sold as.
Yeah.
And going with that, how do you think that completely like the AI and the whole story about the ChatGPT and everything will impact actually the game development and the game experience in the end? since everything will be behind the scene, probably connected to some way, some sort of AI.
It's going to be really cool. So that's a super interesting question, not one that I've actually thought about too much, but something that comes like to mind right away for me is that things like Chat GPT, which are simulating personalities, would be a very cool thing to put into a AI that was social focused, right? I don't think Chat GPT or OpenAI is going to do much for combat within games, but your ability to interact with an NPC might be highly enhanced through something like OpenAI and ChatGPT, which allows for that conversation and allows for a more free-forming, personality and persona.
What do you
Definitely.
think? Yeah.
I think it's a step up from like placeholder assets.
Yeah.
Or content where, like, if you're like in the super early stages of game development, you're like, I needed like, I want a slight step past like what's the placeholder text called? LOP, Lauren Lipson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So just like a much better step than Lauren Lipson is thinking everything, or just like I think that'd be cool in that way for sure.
Absolutely. And then if you could take that and like if you know Shadows of Mordor, which is a game that came out with some really cool advanced AI, I think that's eventually going to become an industry standard where like AI is complex enough to have a persona and more of like a personality attached to the creature or the NPC rather than just case and if statements saying like, hey, if I feel happy, how do I feel, or how do I respond or whatever.
Yeah. I will say I almost like the idea of like everyone's experience will be like somewhat unique, but it also makes me scared for speedrunners. It's like if that people are going to be like, man, I hope I get lucky seating for like all the dialogue today, because
that's interesting. Or maybe if it's more freeform like that, speedrunners are going to get good at prompting, right? Because they're going to have to prompt the NPC quickly and with like the lowest amount of time, but the richest amount of detail. That's interesting. That is a really cool, speedrunner.
It's changing the game.
Changing the game. Yeah.
What if it's like voice activated and like they just have recordings? That's like part of it.
I think that would be like next step. Like definitely like 20, 30 years down the line, we're going to be talking to NPCs for sure.
That's nuts.
Great. It's really great how actually the impact will be from the AI perspective to the gaming development at all. And that's I mean there's like that's one type of the advantage of using the AI. But what do you think on the other hand, like we will be able to use also the AI to build a perfect bot for the game and then run in the end the game experience, and also the games, like for example the poker game can be built the bot that actually can act so good pretend, and you can set for example the winning ratio, like for example, oh, I want 80% to win, and even though like if someone is start a chat, you can set your chat your bot to actually chat really like a human. So I mean it will be much harder to actually recognize if to make the algorithm that will recognize if the on the other side is a bot or a human.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're already seeing that with like hacking and cheats. I mean, the epidemic of specifically with online multiplayer first-person shooters and cheating is just rampant. It's really bad. There's not really a good solution to it either, because as technology gets better, it's just going to be better and easier to cheat. But at the same time, it's going to be like an arms race almost, in the sense that like you've got people who want to just like use the hacks and cheats, and then you've got people who are trying to catch them, and so it's really just going to be an arms race between those two, with AI now enabling it.
Yeah, it will be hard to catch the pattern and the logic how to actually recognize the bot. So making the farm of voting farm will be kind of much easier and easier to make.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds good. Now we can wrap up and start digging into the Claudius Adventures code part. So a second. In day 3, what we can see, we develop the shooting feature, so we can fire the rockets, and we can change the type of the rocket on the right side using the C character, and how we actually move our player, the rockets will be fired. And also what we can see is that our rocket have some sort of like basic velocity, so it's very slow in the beginning, and then it's coming much faster and faster, and we'll see how it was done on the code side. Phil, do you have any kind of recommendation on the way how the velocity should be developed in the game? Is there any standard for that?
No, when you get into game dev, you'll quickly learn that standards are completely shot to the side. No, I think what you have here, when I was looking at it, looks a lot like what I would have written in C++ and for Unity, where you just want to control initial velocity or initial momentum versus gathered momentum. And so after that, you can, and like that's basic movement or essentially for trajectory. Yeah. So what you have here is what I would expect. I do have a question though about how you're loading all this. So I see that it's a class for projectile, right? Do you load, so when you shoot, when you activate the trigger for like shoot, you obviously create the prefab, or you create some sort of object that gets loaded into the scene and then starts acting. My question is, do you do preloading, or are you loading on the fly?
So we have initial preloading where we are loading the all assets, and here we have player projectiles that are preloaded, and that include only the assets, the whole graphics. And from there, we are passing that assets to our player on this place, and we are setting like all possible ammo types that we will use. So that's here. Initially, it will start from the 0, and then once the C character was pressed, we are switching the type of that we will use. So we are updating the texture that is on the top right of the screen, and here on the space, this is the space character. What I'm doing like here is that I'm creating a new projectile, and I'm pushing that inside of the array. So potentially in the future, what we can do, we can have some limits, for example, in the counter that will take care of, for example, if you have 100 rockets, so you can have some limits and then collect them, etc. And from here, I'm updating the time. I'm moving on every frame rate. I'm extending the movement based on the velocity, and the velocity is like every time higher and higher. So this is I mean that's something that I find out. I also saw that they, I mean, what we can find that there is like some super fancy algorithms that doing something with the math, like like sinus and cosinus, like coordinate, but I'm not sure about that. And using the delta, I mean, this is like the basic of velocity. Probably that will have something with the angle. If we want to have some angles and moving around, we can explore that today or in the future. But more or less that's it. And here, based on the player, before we update the position. So let me, I'm checking if actually our rocket is out of the stage, and if it is, I'm removing that from the stage, and then I'm removing that element from the game to actually to stop to avoid memory leak and everything that is going with that. So optimization, some sort of, so to not have like unlimited. If we fire like 10 10 rockets, we want to remove them once they are out of the stage.
Cool.
That's basically the flow. Yeah, also from here, what we can see that we have the x and epsilon that are the positions that we want initially to show the rocket. So if we move, I will now actually slow down this to second. I will not use the velocity, and I will put here to be much slower, so we can see how actually the x and epsilon position work. So if we change this to be 200, and then
I'm guessing these are units of pixels, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, it's in pixels, and you can see that from here, now it's starting from here. I just want, this is actually just for pointing the proper rocket, so where actually it will start. And then we can see, like, for example, this small should start probably from here. And then in the future, we should have, like, since the graphic is different for all of the styles that we have, we should have some configuration that actually will set the something like this. So if we are having like this style of the rocket that we are using, then it should fire from here. I was so close to it on the time, on the right place. And in the future, also what we will probably cover in the coming up episode will be hitting the enemy or any object on the screen. So recognizing hitting the object, and that's something that it will create much more complexity in the game, and maybe it will be a good time to actually include using the reactive state of programming and observables that actually will trigger all of will handle the state of all elements in the game, and then check if some element is hitting the other. Because currently, like you can see from here, we have the player and all elements that are fired, and then from here on each update we need to kind of double check from here where is the rocket and etc., and then to remove. And if we will and later we will have the enemy, and that actually means that from the game here, from the kind of root, we would need to do the same thing here, and then to check like, oh, where is the all rockets, are they hitting the enemy and etc., because we don't have any event emitter from our classes.
Right. Yeah, so it's not really easy to react to things changing in the code, at least not very easily.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I was thinking though. And do you feel any kind of way of how that actually
So
should be
my first instinct here goes like, do you guys have, and we talked about this very briefly, do you guys have the idea of a rigid body? And if so, and just from looking at this, if you do, that would be like an underlying template, or sorry, an underlying child or parent object that would be this would be inheriting from something like a character parent object. Do you have anything like that, or is this player object, or just
I mean, yeah, I mean, what actually we'll do is something like we can get for example the player, and then get the bounds that will give us like the square of our element, and then we can see, oh, it's kind of overlapping there, and if that is the state, then do this or that. It's not like something super fancy.
So I guess from the Unity experience that I have, right, you would create a rigid body, and a rigid body means that what you're basically saying is like there's an outline here, right? And that this is going to interact with the world. This is essentially my interaction with the world. If I was a game object, I don't have insides, right? I'm just code or whatever. But the outside of me, the inside of me, and then the outside of me, these are defined boundaries of what we call a rigid body, right? And so when you look at it and think about it from like, let's take 3 objects that you're going to inevitably have to create. You're going to have to create a player. You're going to have to create an enemy. So those 2 objects are like together. Those are character objects, right? But you also have to create a bullet. Those 3 objects are all rigid bodies in their own way. So they all should be inheriting from a parent object that is something called like rigid body or some sort of like physical manifestation within the virtual world.
Yeah.
So,
and that way, and the reason why you would want to do that is specifically for the ability to not have to redefine the logic every time you've added in a new element to the game. If the elements are all sharing some commonality to it, which is like this idea of this rigid body, then the bullet, the enemy, and the player all have physicality in the game world, which is what you're looking for. And then that physicality can be acted on, such as, am I overlapping?
Right. Yeah. If you can have a common way of defining what it means to overlap, then all of a sudden things start moving a lot faster. So like in my experience, like one of the 2, like at least in 2D, not so much, I haven't done anything ever in 3D, but like the 2 approaches I've always thought of was like, I either want to do things by like thinking of things as circles and just always considering distances. Because like that can make certain ideas like happen a little easier. And then like in other cases, it's like the classic, like, well, I'll have a rectangle, I have an array of rectangles, and I just have a bunch of helpers that for some reason that just calculates if this set of rectangles overlap this set of rectangles at a given time. And then the ability to like push said rectangles like out of the rectangles and all that fun stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's actually, so just so that we're talking all the same terms, when we're talking about the rigid body, like I said, you have the defined outside, but you have the defined inside, right? And that's what Mark was just talking about, is the inside. This is the configuration of like, well, what happens when overlap happens? When something overlaps this, should it push it out? Should it disappear? Should it, there's a lot of different questions that can happen once the overlap happens, but you need to be able to identify that the overlap has happened.
Yeah, so that's the first step. And then you got to deal with issues like the bullet moves so fast that on one frame, it wasn't hitting me. On the second frame, it missed, apparently, right through me.
Mario 64 backwards trick.
Yes. Now I got to start clipping. Which, hey, some people will say those are bugs. Others will say those are features.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, when the bullet is hitting, like probably we will start the different animations, right? Like here we'll trigger some action, and then once the kind of health, or once that object is hit in numerous way of time, then it will be obviously like kind of destroyed and removed from the stage. So as I understand, like if I get it right, so currently what we have a player, and then player have include the bullets and hold all bullets that will be triggered. But actually it will have much more sense to move the bullet from the out of the player and put like here also kind of in the parent, in the root, we will add the bullet and the enemies, and then we can have everything kind of at the same level of inheritance, and then from there we can actually follow up, like was there like collision, are the elements are hitting each other, and then from here, if for example we find out that there is like element was hit, we would say, oh, for example, this player or this enemy, whatever, kind of destroyed, and then we will call out some function that will, fire up some animation on that.
Exactly. Yeah. And what I would say too, if you want to go back to that, the comment there. So I'm going to send you guys a picture of the idea between bullet pooling and bullet instantiation, because there's a huge benefit to your run, like your FPS and your run speed, if you preload things like bullets into the background and then have them disabled. They don't need to be, you know what I mean? They don't need to be there, but they can be disabled in the background. And as a player starts shooting, what you actually do is just pull the disabled, right? You pull it forward, you enable it, let it live for whatever length of time it lives for, and then kill it, and then bring it back to the disabled pool. Why? Now you're not instantiated in class after class. A lot of game development is anti-patterns against development. Because as developers, we are almost always in a state of a dynamic data streams where we don't really know what we're about to get. We have to kind of act on what we get, right? Game development is almost the entire opposite, where we pretty much know exactly what the player is going to have access to and available to them, and then we just define the behavior along the way. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to touch on is that your rigid body. So can I type in here? Hey, I can. Okay, cool. So if I was going to do this personally, the way that I would look at this would be your rigid body is your highest level, and this defines passive action. Actually, well, I don't know if passive action is a word, but whatever. Underneath that, you would have your character, which would become, player. Which could become a player, and which could become a enemy. And the reason why this matters, if I can spell that right, I spelled it even worse, so I'm just going to leave it like that. And the reason why this matters is this is where you would add things like HP, stamina, like, properties that the character class will share between both enemies and players. And then players are really just specialized further by these are controlled by users. These aren't, right? And so looking at the last one that we had our bullet. And so the bullet would go here. And the reason why you want your bullet to go here is, again, because you want to be the passive benefits of the rigid body should be shared between the bullet and the character class. The character is just more specialized than the bullet. And you could specialize that bullet down further, of course, right? You could then get, you can get lasers, you can get, whatever you said, explosive rounds, right? So slow explosive rounds. You can further continue specializing those bullets to then tweak the configuration of the bullet object. I'll get rid of these two though.
Yeah, I think this is like a good approach to it. I also think a slight alternative would kind of think of it in terms of like a mixins type of idea, where everything essentially is just flat, and what really defines them is like, what mixins am I going to throw at this thing? So like I'm gonna splash a character mixin onto it, and also like for how it moves, like it's the controlled, like player controlled mixin, whereas like the enemy might have like, this is like the dumb enemy, I guess, like doesn't dodge bullets, doesn't know how to shoot you, doesn't know how to aim right, and like all those things. And like likewise for like bullets. Trying to find commonality between like the things that you're trying to define, it's gonna help you in the long run, I guess.
And it'll save coding down the line, like specifically with the taking advantage of the passive benefits of something, right? If the underlying parent object is what's doing the tick check for overlapping, then you no longer have to worry about that in subsequent child objects, which is really convenient because then you get to focus on child object.
Yeah. You also focus on things like, don't worry about overlapping bullet. Like,
yep.
Just worry about these specific things. Like, even though they're all technically interactable, but there's a whitelist or a blacklist of things where like, don't do the calculations for this. That's a waste of time. Also, like, what kind of style of rendering should this thing have? So like, there's like that idea of like, preload it, don't preload it. So like, that could be another thing that like bullets have, where you can like easily just try to define that.
Nice. I mean, this is very, very useful indeed, like very insightful. And I'm thinking like just about this. So it means that then, for example, the whole currently like we have here for the player, once the key down is pressed, we are doing some action like moving up and down. Actually, all of that like controls should be included like here inside of
Yeah,
the rigid body.
that's
And
correct. Well, inside the character, not the rigid body, because I don't think. Oh, well, I guess yeah, you're right, because the bullets might have, but uh, does that account for static objects? Like if you were to put down a block in front as a just like as a barrier, right? You don't want any movement whatsoever. It's still a rigid body, but it's going to have a stateless, like it's not going to be moving essentially. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, so don't throw it on the queue where like we check to see if your movement has changed and then move on from there. Like save yourself that trip.
exactly.
And I kind of feel like what's shot me in the foot a lot of times with this stuff, because like it's obviously really important to get this thing going, but like when you take it towards like a mixing approach, it's a lot easier to quickly refactor and be like oh well yeah I want this way to like filter these things. I'm just gonna throw it in real quick, and because like everything is like architecturally like it's technically flat, but like they're obviously completely separate. Like you could easily draw a graph and it would show the hierarchy between it. Um, yeah, I think yeah for like I guess yeah like movable, that would be like a good concept to like implement. Um, and then how you define how things are movable. Um, that would be important to throw in.
And luckily, if you have the movement baked into your rigid body, that means that when things do take control, right? So if a user is taking control, really all you're updating is the movement should be determined by the player. And then for an AI, it would be determined by, pre-baked. I don't know if you guys are using a state machine or whatever, but whatever AI you're using.
Interesting. So also like as I get it, like then kind of the rigid body will represent the whole logic, like the brain of the game, and then on every frame per second update on ticker, what we will do here actually we will focus like on we will create the function that will check all elements position and check like if there is collision like hitting a bullet or whatever. Definitely, it's good to know. And is it like a good practice? For example, like we have now the character, and then we have the player and the enemy. How actually these kind of nested classes should go? Like how deep is like more than 3 levels, 4 levels? When is
Oh,
As
good?
deep as it takes.
yeah, typically for game development, man, it
Yeah.
gets deep.
Yeah,
Okay.
This is a common
as much
pattern.
as you can be sane.
Yeah, exactly. As long
Whatever
as
you're sand, you can withhold.
but yeah, no, for the Unity, from a Unity context, this is how things are done. With the one exception for this, that there's technically, so I briefly just said it. There's something called the state machine, and this is a widely used pattern within game development in which you'll take well, it's a state machine. So I imagine that everybody maybe have created at least a state machine or understands maybe the concept of a state machine. But a state machine is like start at idle state, and when action or when external behaviors or when external environmental pressures or whatever are added, the state is then changed, right? And so that's how AI is usually developed. I've developed, and I can share with you guys some of the finite state machines that I've created specifically for dealing with and interacting with AI. So that's how you'd make your enemy. But you can also use those same state machines for a lot of the control mechanisms for a game. For example, you have a game state, which is started, paused, or exited. And a lot of people don't really consider those before they start. If you if you pause your game, if you haven't baked that into the core logic of the game, like from a management standpoint, it's going to be very hard to pause the game.
You're gonna use a very hacky pause.
Exactly why, yeah, Dark Souls does not pause because of that exact reason.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and even if they do try to planned for it. It's funny to see some games where like you'll see someone's hair for some reason just freaking out in the like with the pause menu up, and it's like that's odd.
But that's the reason why, right? Because you go into this pause. So you go into this pause menu. Your character becomes locked in place or whatever. Like your in-game representation gets locked, but the representation of, for example, hair flow doesn't. But it's stacking now. All those actions are just stacking tick after tick and need to be released at some point. And if you've paused the, let's say, the visual component to your game, like you've menued and you're now in this menu, and the overlaying, like the adventure game is like has been paused in a sense, that when that game becomes unpaused, it now has hundreds of these like movement actions for the hair all stacked up and then applied immediately.
Yeah. And then you also get like weird stuff too, like moving flame, because like typically some lower language plugin thing is like semi-responsible for that. So like you may or may not have like as much control as you wish you did, and they're like, that's fine. We'll call it a feature. We have movable flames in pause. So yeah.
Cool. And from the Unity perspective, like, did you have you done before like the responsive game, like, and how that actually affects, like, from the PixiJS perspective, what we will do, like usually, for example, we would know that player position usually is like 50-50, and then if it's mobile view, then we will just completely rotate and change the position for all elements on the stage. And this is the way how actually I have done before. And is there any other way on the Unity, or better way how actually that can be handled?
Yeah, so I was, this is actually an interesting question, because I was watching the stream a bit and I was just checking out the actual game as it plays, because I haven't gotten a good look of that yet. And so one thing that was like kind of half standing out to me was that the idea between so a lot of game development isn't actually the development of the game, but it's the development of the tools to build the game. And you'll find that if you start deep diving, you'll find that a lot of people in Unity, like there's a specialized role, like position in Unity development, which is just building UI to build better games. It's literally all they do. So obviously you don't have exactly that, because you don't have this like really complex software that you're running. So you don't get access to like a pre-build where the world is like there, but it's not really running, right? You don't get like the viewpoint of it. But what you could do, and this is what Unity does in a maybe a bit more of an enhanced scale, but like this still applies here, is that you have the idea of a pointer in space within the world. And so you point it at a place, like let's say 50-50 there, right? So that's the starting spot that you want to start. You point the starter there and you say that point is the starting spot. And so instead of saying 50-50 here, you're referencing the starting point dot, X, starting point dot Y. You might be like, okay, but why would I do that? Well, you do that because if you scroll down to your gun, the way that you're currently marking where the bullet comes out is through this complex like give and take of like, okay, do I do -50, +50, okay, +40, like, you know what I mean? You're doing this like weird like having to like go down this. No, okay, then go down a little bit more to the right. Okay, that looks good. It's not very accurate. Whereas if you had this pointer system, what you could do is you could look at that sprite and you could point right to the gun's exit and say, that is the gun. This is the pointer to the exit of the gun. And so when the gun goes to shoot, where would it get that information from? It would get it from that pointer.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, I think like 99% of the time, like you probably put like that pointer like at the center of things, but like the entry or the exit point of the gun, for instance, is a good example of like that's not like always how it would work. And sometimes like for the sprites of these bullets, like again, you maybe would want that to be where it is, but like maybe it's actually like where it's about to leave the gun. Or maybe the opposite, if you want the animation for it to look like it's coming out of the gun. But like the point is you don't want to be playing math every single time you're like, I changed my mind. I want it kind of poking out when it shoots out. Now I want it like stuffed in. Now, you know what? That looks stupid, actually. And it's like,
Exactly, yeah.
Write code and make it easier.
Now, adding a pointer over top of a sprite in JS, I I couldn't even begin to tell you where to start for that. I have no idea. But I think it would be really valuable because then you could do some really complex, and I say pointer, like, don't get misconstrued. It's not like a technology pointer. I'm just literally pointing at a piece of visual that I want to do something with.
Yeah, so like if a sprite was like, let's say 40 pixels by 40 pixels, like that pointer might be at 2020.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it can
just be the
report that it's at. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So like not pointers in like the C++ world. Like don't freak out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that I got like so. Yeah, and going with like the previous thing was about adding the bullets on the stage before kind of they are like fired. It means that like here we should actually add them, like we should add, for example, to have in on the stage, for example, the 3 bullets all the time, but that bullets would be hidden, like with completely just with completely alpha 0 or transparency.
Yep.
And then once it's like fired, it should just show up and start animation or whatever.
Exactly, yeah. And that way what you're doing is you're saving runtime resource by pushing it off to the build time. I don't know if that's exactly the case in this scenario, if that works, the analogy works exactly the same, but like in C++, that's what you're doing, right? Because what you're saying is like instantiate the 10 bullets that I'm going to need prior to the game starting. And if the player spams the shoot button and we get to 11 bullets, don't worry, don't stress. We'll just make a new instantiation. But what we're doing is we're making 1 instead of 11, which is obviously going to be resource wise going to be much more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, like if you think about what's it? If there's 20 bullets on the screen, right, and they're just flying across the screen, like the player shot thousands of bullets at this time. Like, what's more performant, creating and deleting 1,000 bullets, or doing a magic trick with 20 bullets?
Right, exactly. And with game development, I think a lot of it is that magic, like doing that magic trick.
Yeah, like the RE2 remake, or RE3 remake with what's his name, who chases you all over the place.
Yep.
He like kind of like despawns, but like his assets are just hidden somewhere and just like waiting to jump scare you eventually.
Absolutely. Skyrim has the very infamous kill box, which is like literally just a 4x4 rectangle underground that when bodies get to a certain time limit in the game, it spawns them down there so that instantiation wise, it doesn't need to load the resources in if you're not looking at it. But when it does become relevant again, it'll load them back out into the world.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And it's also, by the way, just to completely, finish off that whole circle there, that's also why resources are hidden underground. If you've ever played video games and you're like, oh man, like there's a bunch of resources hidden right underneath the player's feet. I wonder what that is. Well, those are your guns and stuff because you don't really put them into your backpack. There's no space there. We put them under the floorboards essentially, hide them from you, and then when you change out your gun from shotgun to assault rifle, you're not actually pulling it out. What you're really doing is just changing out the models underneath your feet.
Yeah, or like if your game is like inside of a globe, like it's somewhere outside of the background sphere-y thing. Yeah. A lot of cool Easter eggs. If you ever watch like those out of bounds game streams, a lot of fun stuff to kind of see there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I want to ask you also, we had that conversation on the first episode about the frame per second. What would be your recommendation about the kind of standard frame per second? Is it like 60 or it should go above or below that? And is it like good practice to actually set the maximum frame per second that should be kind of limited to that maximum and setting the minimum, or it should be depending on the device?
I think depending on the device for sure in a lot of senses. I mean, phones are just going to have the limited capacity, and I think websites like JavaScript or whatever on your browser might run into the same. That being said, industry standard is 60 frames. That's what the human eye can catch, and so that is right around the mark where we want to be, so that the game seems fluid. Anything lower than that, what's going to end up happening is there's going to be stutter. for your objects. And then anything after that, you actually get diminishing returns up to 120. And that's when it really starts to become felt and like known. You can really start seeing it at about 120 frames per second. Things become really, really fluid at that point. But after like between 60 and 120, you're getting such diminishing returns for the frames that's not even worth it. I think capping yourself at 60 is great. It's perfect.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I will just turn out to the comment that we got on our last episode about how we are adding the PixiJS container actually, and the whole game canvas game inside of our div container. So the comment was really good, and it was about using the Angular render 2 through render 2 in Angular option. And so from here I did a bit of refactor. So I'm appending the child using the render 2, and I'm passing the native element of the Pixie game container, and then I'm passing the game view. So the advantage of using this approach is actually we would have we would not run out of the ng zone. Mark, you can correct me if I said something wrong, but that is actually the huge benefit, that we don't need in that case to worry about the ng zone.
Yeah, so something that might be a little bit weird to people who aren't familiar with Angular and their madness. Angular wraps everything in zones, and that's how it knows when things are done and can do whatever magic that Angular does behind the scenes. Which is why, unfortunately, you don't really get to use like native JavaScript stuff, because some of those things, there's no guarantee that the zones will pick it up. So if you want to, almost guarantee that it will, then do it the Angular way. But that's a good practice. Here, there's not much of a risk because everything is in a canvas. So it's not like we're removing and adding DOM elements. So you can probably get away with it, and nothing bad will happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and just since we are running out to the time, just to show you the picture that Phil sent me about actually how the game elements should work. So once the element is going out to the stage, it should be destroyed, and then once it's destroyed, actually the new one, I guess it should appear here, or actually this one that is destroyed, just probably, if it's not destroyed, what we can do, we can reuse that element and just change the position in the alpha.
Exactly. Yeah. Because as it hits the off screen, as you get off screen, your player's not going to see it anyways. And so why not make it the next one coming out of the gun, right?
Yeah. You probably don't even have to necessarily mess with the alpha too. You can probably just move it off the screen. I think browsers, I don't know for sure, but I think browsers do use a little bit of magic for things that are outside the screen. I could be wrong on that. Yeah, I don't know.
If it's resource efficient to take it off the screen, I'm not too sure what you're talking about with this alpha thing, but like if JavaScript treats things off screen as like kind of half objects or like quarter objects, where it's just like it's not really rendering it, it kind of understands it's there, but it's not rendered it. Obviously, take advantage of the efficiency.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, since we're coming to the end of today episode, I would like to invite you to pull the Clavius Adventures GitHub repo. As we promised, all UI assets are revealed, so you can get them from the branch. Just check out the branch. I think it's UI or design. I can't remember how I name it, but you will find it. And every branch is splitted. Actually, divided is isolated by the day of the stream, so you can have like day 1, day 2, and day 3. And that's all for today. Thank you both for coming up and for joining me with the stream. All those information that you share are extremely valuable, and if you have any suggestions or something that you would like to see in upcoming episodes, feel free to to share on our Discord channel. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite. Honestly, it was a lot of fun.